Just see if I can help at least a couple people understand a little bit more about the class and how it works. And I'm going to go over some of the weapons and a couple different builds, and mostly over the talent tree and how to make sense of what nodes are good and which ones aren't. So we'll start with weapons. So this is a build using the electrokinetic force staff, which is the lightning staff. This staff is the weirdest one because all the other ones kind of are either multi-purpose or they're really good at horde clear, but they're not good at like single target stuff. And this one you kind of want to build for a lot of crit, so I took crit chance and I took surge and warp nexus. So surge automatically gives another extra 5%, so I have 10% base, and warp nexus, the higher your peril, you get around 20% at max. So just from the weapon alone you have 30% crit chance, and then we also take one of the auras called prescience, and it also gives another 5% crit chance. So we have a 25% crit chance at base. That's without like the weapon stats or anything else. And you see as our peril gets higher, we'll start trading more. And it even does really decent damage to armor. It also stun armor. So that is what I would say it's best at, is just if you have a wall of crushers, bulwarks, that kind of thing. It does very well at staggering them. And since it has really good crit chance, surge will make it so you shoot 2 projectiles on crit. See how I hit twice with the numbers there? It's because it's a crit. And every crit you shoot 2 projectiles. So it makes it so you can kill like the little gunners, and if you crit, you kill them in like 1 hit. And it's even good at killing those such ones. It's good at killing, you know, maniac. It's not bad at killing those either. It's good at killing motion specials. With it pretty quickly. It's not terrible, but it's not like the fastest way to kill them either. So it's a little bit of a weird one, and I see a lot of people thinking that it'll stagger the whole wave, when in reality it'll only affect like 2 enemies or maybe 3 at a time if they're like at a good angle for it. You see, so it's not good for horde clear just because it won't really hit all of them. It'll only hit like 2 of them at a time. And it only does like the big burst of damage to 1. You see how that one didn't die? So it does like a decent little chain of damage, and then it ends in a burst. And the main burst of damage will go on whichever enemy is a primary target first. It'll still burst on the second enemy hit, but it won't be for nearly as much damage. So it usually won't kill them. That being said, it's still a really good staff. It just takes a little bit of practice. I think it pairs really well with Assail. I wouldn't recommend Smite or Brain Rupture with it, but you can play Smite. It's just more of a supportive thing, and I don't think Smite is very fun to play, so I don't personally like it. It's very good, it's just not very entertaining. But Assail, it eats through hordes, it eats through anything that's not armored, really. So you can take that, it recharges pretty quickly, so you can use like a decent amount pretty quick, just to help you, and then just use your melee for more. So, it's a different playstyle for Psyker, which makes it pretty entertaining, because if I switch to like the Void Strike, right? The Void Strike staff will do decent damage against basically everything if you have it built for crit. Even armor. It'll still take a little while, but as long as you're critting pretty often, you'll kill crushers and stuff like that just fine. Including like all the specials. Raiders will die really quickly. it's good for forward because the projectile itself goes through everything until it hits like a solid object. You see how I killed everything from over there? I can even hit like, even that stuff over there, I can hit it. So, like if you're playing the Void Strike, it makes it really easy to just cleave through everything. So you almost never have to use your melee weapon, which if you want that type of playstyle is really good. And then you would just take like Brain Burst for, you know, if there's a gunner really far away, you could just take Brain Burst and it one-shots gunners, it one-shots basically every special besides the mutant, it one-shots Ragers, if I remember correctly. Yep. So, the only thing it won't one-shot straight off is Ogrins, but it'll 2 or 3 shot them if you have the right amount of peril and stuff like that built up. The other staffs are the Inferno and the Void Blast. The Void Blast is competitive in my opinion for the best staff in the game, just because if you hit stuff in the center of the explosion, it CCs it. So even if it doesn't kill it, it makes it so it's not a threat. Even Crushers, Bulwarks, Reapers, it knocks them all on the ground. So even though you're not like one-shotting them, you can just CC everything for your team and yourself, which makes it so you don't really have to care about looking for animations as long as you just knock the enemy on the ground before. They do have a small like CC invulnerability window from this though. So if we go look at like pressure, right? If I knock him over and I do it again while he's getting up, it won't do it for a couple seconds. So you kind of do need to pay attention to that, but in the time he gets up, you should be able to get him back up and kill him before he really gets to do any overheads or anything like that. The Inferno staff requires kind of a different build, or a different play style, depending. You can play a couple different things on the Flame staff. They're all good. The Flame staff's probably the easiest one to use. The light attack is not a projectile, it's a little burst of flame that you can use to push lighter enemies around. And this can kind of semi-stagger maulers a little bit, but it can the main thing about this is it can absolutely stagger Ragers. And Ragers can sometimes be really annoying to deal with the Psyker, but with this you can just kind of push them around, and while they're staggered you can just kill them. You can also it's also useful for keeping the horde off of you. And it pushes all that back. The real damage will come from charging it up. And it'll melt pretty much everything that isn't like a crusher. As you can see, the crusher, it doesn't really take very much damage from this. Like, you can still kill them eventually, but it's gonna take you a little while, so it's easier just to have a melee weapon that deals with crushers really easy, or Brain Burst. The hardest part about using the Inferno staff is that if gunners are any sort of distance away, you obviously cannot hit them. So you need to use Brain Burst or Assail, and it's honestly preference based on like what you enjoy more. I kind of flip-flop between them. Like, I have a couple different builds here that I use for that. So the Inferno staff is very strong. It just needs a little bit of help with like with any ranged enemies. Playing it with Bubble Shield is also a good idea, just because you can use it to kind of close distance and protect yourself and your team. But that's pretty much the ranged weapons that I like to use. I don't play Gun Psyker, just because if I feel like playing a gun, I'll just go play Vet instead. Gun Psyker doesn't have a great way to restore toughness very quickly. The most important part about each class, in my opinion, is how they restore toughness and how often you can get that back. So playing a Psyker with a gun, you basically have to use a sail to get your toughness back outside of staying in coherency with your teammates, which if you want to try to like not get hit as much as possible, which is always, you know, recommended, then that's fine, but you still aren't going to have a great time if anything even slightly goes wrong. So especially for beginners, I don't recommend playing Gun Psyker until you have a really good handle on the class. The melee weapons, the Psyker has a couple unique ones. He has the Force Sword and the Blaze Force Greatsword. The Force Sword, the regular Force Sword, it has 3 marks: the Obscurious, the Deimos, and the Il-Izzy, which is just a really weird name. But the Obscurus is kind of your bog standard. This is what you'll start using when you first start playing Psyker. I'll go over each mark and show you kind of the way I like to use it. So it's got a very decent moveset. Light attack spamming. It's not bad for, you know, clearing horde. And the heavy attacks are a heavy, and then a swipe, and then a heavy. The push attack is all for 4 swords are always going to be like this little forced shove thing, which can be kind of useful to get like ragers off you. So the most, I guess the useful thing about this mark is that its heavy chain starts with an overhead, so it's good for armor. Overheads are always good for armor, so if we hit them all around the head, we can heavy and then light attack and then heavy light attack, and it'll chain always back to the overhead. So you can get some pretty big damage out of it, and it's a satisfying little combo to use. So even at the start of playing Psyker, you can use this sword and have a pretty good time. Next is the Deimos, which is probably the strongest of the 3. It's got a decent like light attack spam for like horde clear. It doesn't have like the most cleave in the world though, so you'll have to kind of get used to blocking a little bit more. Because like it'll hit stuff almost in like a straight line, but it won't hit, you know, side to side. It doesn't have like the best swing arc, so it won't really cleave very far into a horde. This first heavy looks like an overhead, and I guess it technically is, but it doesn't like do a crazy amount of damage. So what you want to do, since the light attack is always this like little stab, this counts as an overhead, sort of. It does decent single target, but the special thing is the secondary heavy will knock over basically anything that isn't a boss if you hit it in the face. And it does insane damage to armor. You can one-shot mutants. You can one-shot anything that isn't, like, again, an Ogren or a boss. It'll almost one-shot it by hitting it in the head with a combo. So this is why this sword is probably one of the best ones you can use on Psyker, because it just deals with everything really well. And the way you do this, again, is a light attack and then charge for a heavy. And then you just light attack again to reset it. So you light, heavy, light, light, heavy, light, heavy, and you just keep doing that. And that's your like combo to deal with anything big. It still does really good damage to bosses as well. Like unyielding, still does really decent damage. So again, this sword is really good for everything. The weapon special for all the swords, by the way, is it charges it up, and you can do a little like staggering attack. I don't really ever use this to be honest, unless like I'm not particularly using the sword, because the sword already has such a great stagger that you don't need it, and it doesn't really do more damage than that heavy does anyways. The last is the Illici. This one has honestly a pretty decent light spam with like a lot of cleaving attacks. But I would recommend starting with the first heavy and then just light attacking for forward stuff, because it honestly has a really good forward clear combo. Like, this is very fast and it does really decent damage to even like the slightly tankier mobs, and it'll obviously do better against the dregs. The only problem with it is it's not quite as fast with dealing with armor stuff, but you can still chew through it pretty okay. Like, we're hitting for a minimum of like 350-ish, so I'd still say that's like pretty decent. Especially since most of the time you won't be alone, you'll be with teammates, and almost everybody always builds for armor anyways. I do recommend trying out both of these marks, or all three of them, kind of figuring out your playstyle. But that's probably, the regular 4-sword is probably one of my favorite melee weapons in the game. It has a lot of diversity, and it handles most things in the game pretty well. So it's great for almost any situation. The Force Greatsword is probably the newest weapon, I think, for the Psyker, if I remember correctly. And I mean, everybody's seen clips of this. It's a big greatsword. It charges up these 2 bars on the side. Your weapon special. And you send out, you know, the Moonlight Greatsword attack, and it cleaves through absolutely everything until it hits a wall. So it's pretty good. The light attack spam is just side to sides on the mark. So it's pretty good for horde clear. I'd still recommend heavy light, just because the heavy will make it so you consistently one-shot more enemies. It's even not really that bad to use against light armor. Like light armored stuff, it still does enough damage that I think it's still fine to use this combo. Which is a bonus. You don't really have to worry about changing up your combo mid like fight. If there's like, oh, you see maulers in the mix, and you can just still keep spamming this combo and you're still gonna be mostly fine. For armor, if you really want to kill it fast though, you want to just keep spamming heavies, because after this first heavy, it'll transition into overheads, and it won't stop doing overheads until you reset the swing pattern. Like, you can just keep overheading for as long as you feel like you need to. There is one thing to note, that if you're like, say you're running and you start charging it heavy, you'll swing from the left, and it won't really chain into the horde clear combo. So always pay attention. If it starts from the right, then you're good to just chain into this heavy light chain endlessly. But if you're running and it starts from the left, and you try to do that, it'll start transitioning into the overhead. Which isn't bad, because you can still, it's still a little bit faster than doing overhead, so you can use that to chain into the overhead a little bit quicker. And that is the Mark 8 of the Force Greatsword. It has one other mark, and that would be the Mark 6. This is the one you'll start with. I personally don't use this mark very much. It's a little bit faster and it has a little bit more of a mix-up in its light attack chain. So if you want to use light attacks more often against single target, this is the one I would go for. It also has just a better combo overall for dealing with armor and the heavies, because the stab does a lot of single target damage as well as the overhead. The only other weapon that was unique to the Psyker but no longer is the dueling sword, and in my opinion it should have never stopped being unique to the Psyker. This weapon is obviously very strong. Every single class that has it uses it because it's just incredibly overpowered. Or at least at the time of this video it is. They're planning on changing it, so we'll see what they do to it. But it does insane damage to armor, insane damage to unyielding. It attacks incredibly quickly. One-shot mutants with it. Kill rages really quickly. The only thing it kind of struggles with is forward because it doesn't have an insane amount of base damage on the light attack, so you're kind of gonna take a minute shooting through forwards. But as a Psyker, most builds are going to have, you know, your staff for horde clear or assail, and you're not gonna really want to use a melee weapon anyways. So the dueling sword is a really strong option. Those three weapons are, in my opinion, the best melee weapons to use. You can, of course, use other things just to mix it up, but in my opinion, these three are far and above the best. You don't get a lot of melee from your tree. You don't get you get like one thing of attack speed. It's only 10%. You don't really get anything that's specifically for melee damage. So you're not really built to do a ton of melee damage. You just have a lot of really decent options with those three swords. I wouldn't recommend like the chainsword, the chain axe. You just don't it just doesn't feel like you're doing as much as these three. It just doesn't feel very good. But if you really like those weapons, then feel free to try them out. They're not bad by any means. I just think these three are the best. Now for the talent tree. So the top of the tree, this is where you're going to get like your toughness. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to be the main ways you get toughness back. So replenish 7.5% on warp attack. So if you kill anything with any staff, primary or secondary fire, you'll get 7% of your toughness back. Replenish 5% of toughness for each 10% quelled. So if you're at like 80 peril and you quell all the way down, you'll get a pretty decent chunk of toughness back. Battle meditation is 10% chance to quell 10% of peril on kill. This is only really good if you're playing Flame Staff, because Flame Staff and maybe Void Strike too, they cleave through the entire horde, so they hit everything. So you'll kill a lot of the trash really easy. So you'll kill tons and tons of enemies super quick. So this will actually have a decent chance to proc, especially in higher difficulties like Auric and Maelstrom and Havoc. This is good on the Flame Staff. I don't really take it on any other build though. Warp expenditure, replenish 2.5% toughness for every 10% of peril generated. This is kind of nice, but it honestly doesn't feel like it makes that big a difference, so a lot of the time I'll choose to leave this one out in particular. Metal is critical hits, replenish 5% toughness. A lot of the Psyker builds rely on crit, so this is going to be honestly the one. This one and Soul Stealer are the two that I would almost always recommend taking. And if you take metal, then I would always recommend Perfect Timing, just because it gives more warp damage for 10 seconds on critical hit. And that stacks 5 times. So 5 times 3 is is 15. So, 15% damage most of the time. It has a pretty decent uptime, at least if you're in a horde. So, this is just free damage in my opinion. Your 3 blitzes are Brain Rupture, Smite, and Assail. Smite, it locks down everything that isn't a boss and just kind of holds it still and does a little bit of damage. It's not very much damage. It doesn't hurt very much. Its augments increase the number of times it can chain between enemies. It increases the base damage that the enemies that you're shocking take. So if your teammates are hitting them, they'll do more damage. Basically, it makes you and your teammates do more damage to enemies you've shocked, and it also lets your heavy melee attacks electrocute enemies, doing a little bit more damage. Smite is very controversial. It's really new player friendly, and there's nothing really wrong with using it. It's just not very fun to me, because it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. It feels like you're just holding enemies still so your teammates can do stuff. Which, if you really like the support playstyle, there's nothing wrong with that. Play this. Take Enfeeble. The other two are kind of optional in my opinion, but Enfeeble is like what makes Smite really good. Other than like it holds everything still, Enfeeble is just making all of your team do more damage. So it's just, if you're taking Smite, I would never run Smite without Enfeeble. Brain Rupture is competitive with Assail for the best one in my opinion. They're both really good for different reasons. So Brain Rupture is excellent damage against basically everything in the game, because you blow up their head. So it does just a really solid amount of damage. You can kill most specials in 1 hit or 2, if not. Ogryns even, like 2 or 3 hits and they're dead. Kinetic Resonance is the best augment for it. It makes it so if you use your ability, which would be your F key, it makes it so it charges way faster and it generates less peril for 10 whole seconds. So if like a boss spawns and you want to throw down your shield, you switch to Brain Burst and you just go to town, and you can nuke like a quarter or half of the boss's health before it even really gets to do anything. So this is really, really strong. Especially if you have like a yellow or a blue stem. The blue stem will make it charge faster on top of this, and the yellow stem will make your ultimate charge faster, so you can spam it again to get another 10 seconds of having Brain Burst activate really quickly. Kinetic Flare is, it's not like the strongest augment, but it can be helpful. It just has all attacks against specialists, elites, and monstrosities give you a 10% chance to hit the target with Brain Rupture. This is like, you don't have to charge it. It'll just, you hit like a crusher and it'll just Brain Burst it randomly. It has a cooldown of 15 seconds, which is kind of a long cooldown, which is why it isn't like the strongest thing in the world, but it's not bad by any means. So if you have an extra point after you're finished with your build, this augment is definitely one that I would consider. Assail is, I guess, a counterpart to Brain Rupture. Brain Rupture is more for single target stuff. Assail is more for horde clear and like Rager spam, gunner spam. It does really well with all this. It just throws little crystals and they auto home to targets in front of you, kinda. Sometimes they like derp around and like get stuck on walls or something, but for the most part they'll just track towards enemies and hit them in the head. The augments just make it replenish faster and make them pierce, the little crystals pierce targets better. Both augments are good, and it's very solid for horde clear. It just kind of depends which you would rather, Brain Rupture or Assail. The other passives in this section are kind of niche things that can make your build really good. So we'll start with the right side, because this is the side I have allocated currently on this build. Malefic Momentum. This can be used on Gun Psyker or regular. This is increased damage to warp attacks after you kill something with a non-warp based weapon or attack. So if I kill something with my sword and it's not like the charged up version. I'm just hitting stuff with the sword. It'll proc this, and it'll make my next like attack with my staff do more damage. So this is very, very good because you're often switching back and forth, especially in like higher difficulty. You're switching to your sword to deal with a crusher or a mauler, then you're switching back to your staff to deal with the horde or just gunners or whatever. So you proc this pretty consistently, and it's just free damage. So this one is a very solid talent to take. Mind in Motion is also really good. When you're quelling, I'll show you. So I have 45 peril right now. So if I want to start quelling, I'll slow down a little bit when I start to quell. Like I can't walk as fast. It just basically eliminates that. So this is kind of underrated. In higher difficulties, this can really help you out with helping you keep distance from the horde or whatever is around you. And it'll help you feel a little bit smoother going around the area. This right side has, these are like your attack-based passives. These are, I think, the only ones on the tree for melee. And the first one is attack speed. Killing an enemy with Soul Blaze restores toughness and grants crit chance. Melee weak spot kills quell some of your peril and reduce your peril generation. And then you get a whole bunch of extra cleave based on how much peril you have. The more peril you have, the more cleave you have. All of these are pretty solid. I think that it's just a little asking yourself to get into melee range of stuff as Psyker is very dangerous because you're the squishiest class by a lot. So if you're not absolutely super comfortable in melee, then trying to get the value out of these can get you hit and taking free damage, which you can't take very much of as Psyker because you can't stand to. I do like the attack speed one though, just because the great swords do swing a little slow. So this is a good way to help that out, and it just feels good to have. So if any, I would take this and maybe some of the other ones if you have extra points. They're not none of these are bad by any means. Soul Blaze is something you can proc through like Venting Shriek and a couple other things. Like up here, Perilous Combustion, killing an elite or specialist applies Soul Blaze, and Wildfire will spread your Soul Blaze around if it kills stuff. Soul Blaze is not the same as the Inferno Staff, so your burn stacks from the Inferno Staff won't be affected by Wildfire or Soul Drinker. They're just a different type of dot that can be applied. So if you're playing like Perilous Combustion and you're using a specific version of Venting Shriek that applies it, then this can be pretty good. Otherwise, then obviously, if you don't have a build utilizing Soul Blaze, don't take this. Perilous Combustion sounds good, but it can also proc onto Demon Host, which is why I don't take it very often. Because it'll make it so you kill an elite, even if it's with your melee weapon, it'll proc, and it can proc to a Demon Host sometimes, and it can be really unfortunate for you because the Demon Host will aggro, which in itself isn't terrible. The Psyker is one of the classes able to tank the Demon Host for the longest, so it's okay. It's just, I don't know. It's a little annoying to deal with sometimes, so I'd rather just not take it because the value is kind of, it's got decent value, but you already have so much horde clear that it's not necessary. Take a drink of water real quick. So, next we have like Psychonetics Aura. This is probably one of the best talents on the entire tree. The one problem is you do have to take Smite or Brain Rupture. You cannot get this if you use a sail, which is probably like the biggest downside to a sail is you cannot get Psychonetics Aura. This decreases ability cooldown for you and your allies in coherency by 4% when you kill an elite or specialist. This is really, really, really strong. Just because like the more you kill, the more you have your ultimate up, the more your teammates have their ultimates up. This is an incredibly strong talent, probably one of the strongest on the entire tree. So if you take Brain Rupture or Smite, I'd almost never suggest taking Wildfire. It doesn't. The value from this doesn't really feel like much. Psychonetics Aura is almost always certainly the way to go. Perilous Assault is weapon swap speed. It increases as your peril increases. So, this can help. It feels pretty good, but I don't think it's necessary. And these two will make it so your primary attack on your staff will do more damage. So if you want to just have a build where you just kind of just throw your little light balls at people, you definitely would just play that. Like those passages, they're pretty strong, and this build isn't bad. Like, you see it, like, it shoots yourself pretty good. But little lackluster with the talents. It'll obviously do more damage to armor. It's pretty good, but the problem with this is that is it going to be better than just playing and charging up the staff? And the answer is most of the time, not really. I'd rather take stuff to augment survivability or just damage overall instead of specifically like the primary attack. The 3 auras are all good. Prescience is crit chance, so this helps you. This is also pretty good if you have zealots on your team, because they rely on crit for a lot of their builds. Soldier is also helped a lot by this. Ogryn is probably the class that I would say is the least likely to enjoy prescience, because they have such a low crit chance already that it's kind of meh. Unless it's like a gun Ogryn with the machine gun, then maybe. But other than that, Serious Presence is just flat cooldown reduction for you and your team. That's really good, obviously. Probably the most consistently good one. And this is damage against elite enemies. This one's really strong. It's just sometimes it feels like it does make a difference, sometimes it doesn't. It depends what builds your team is running, because it can make the difference between 1 or 2 shotting elites for some of them. So this one can also be really good. But for me, for this build in particular, I take Prescience just because it's a crit-based build. These nodes right here are all pretty good, except for probably unlucky for some. When an ally in coherency with you gets knocked down, you replenish 100% toughness to you and all other allies in coherency, which can be kind of clutch, but it's also somebody has to go down for this to have any value at all. And you have to be in coherency with your allies. So this has like way too many conditions to actually do anything. It is just kind of funny to me. So, you know, I'll play it sometimes just for the you know, just because I think it's mildly funny. One with the warp is probably one of the best ones here. You gain toughness damage reduction based on your current peril. So the more peril you have, more damage reduction you have to your toughness, which is super, super good. Empathic Evasion is also one of the better ones here. Critical hit makes you count as dodging against ranged attacks. So it's basically, as long as you're critting constantly, then if you're critting constantly, then you're basically almost immune to range damage. So this is very, very strong. Anticipation is also really good. It gives you an extra dodge, and it makes your dodge duration a little bit longer. So this is pretty solid as well. Now we're down to the abilities. You got Venting Shriek, Telekind Shield, and Scryer's Gaze. So we'll start with Venting Shriek. This is the ability you're going to start with as a Psyker. It can save you if you get to 100% and you're going to blow up and kill yourself. This can save you. You just tap this button, bam, you're good to go. It knocks out some of your peril. Has a pretty low cooldown, so you can use it pretty often. The augments are, it decreases peril generation for each enemy you hit with it, because it does like a little push in front of you. The push has actually got a pretty decent range. It's a very light push though, so it's not, I wouldn't rely on this push to save you, but it does do a little bit of stagger to stuff in front of you, like on the screen directly in front of you. And this stacks 25 times, so if you do this into a horde, you'll generate a lot less peril. So if you get yourself up to 100%, you shriek into a horde, and then you'll be good to go and just start spamming warp attacks into the horde after this. These two augments are both centered around making Venting Shriek actually do damage. Warp Rupture is, in my opinion, the weakest because it's 1 to 200 damage, and that's just almost nothing. So this one, I don't really see anybody use it. I don't use it either. It just doesn't do enough damage to justify taking it. This one, it applies Soul Blaze. So if you're at 100, like over, I think it's like 75 to 100% peril, you'll apply like 6 stacks of burn. And this will kill the dregs and stuff like the little enemies. It'll kill them in higher difficulty. It'll take a second, but it will kill them. So this, if you take Venting Shriek, I would always take these two, just because it has a really low cooldown. So you can get yourself up to 100 peril and spam this into basically every horde, and you can be a horde clearing monster with it. So Venting Shriek, really strong. Telekind Shield is obviously the meta choice here. If you play Havoc or High Auric Maelstrom or really high difficulty stuff, this is what everybody's mostly going to be playing. It's either, this is just the safest and easiest. You just throw down a shield. As the base ability, you throw down like a wall shield in front of you. With these augments, you throw down a dome, and anybody in the dome replenishes toughness. So this is really good for supporting your team. And it blocks all projectiles. So it can also stop flamers. If a bomber throws a bomb, it'll like bounce off the shield. It'll still blow up, and like the edge of the fire or gas will still creep into the shield, but it won't land directly on top of you. So the shield is very, very strong. The left side augment can be good. It basically gives you 2 charges of the wall shield and makes it so the wall has a chance to stun any enemy passing through it. Oh, it has a chance to electrocute them. And specialists have a 100% chance to get electrocuted, but they also do damage every time they touch the shield. So they can break the shield just by running into it. But it will stun them. So it has its uses, I guess. It's not terrible. My main problem with this is that I don't know if it's been fixed. If it has, please correct me. But this was bugged for a while, where on like the Auric Maelstroms, where you have waves of mutants, waves of dogs, waves of poxbursters, it would stun some of them, but some of them would just go right through it. So it was really inconsistent to get to actually work consistently, because that would be like the best use case for this, is if like, oh, you have waves of hounds or something coming, and then you can just sit there and toss this down, and bam, like they all get stunned on the shield, and you and your team can sit on top of the shield and just go to town. Super easy way to solve waves of mutants, poxbursters, that kind of thing. You can just throw this down and you're golden. So if it works more consistently, this would be better. But or it wouldn't be better than the dome, but it would be better than what I would consider it to be right now. Like if the shield and Venting Shriek are like A or S tier, this is like B tier. Scryer's Gaze, it basically increases your peril. Like it makes you rapidly generate peril. But as you go up, as your peril goes up, you gain damage, crit chance. You're immune to suppression. So when enemies like are shooting near you, and it like makes your gun or whatever flinch all over the place, you're immune. You're straight up immune to that. For every second you spend in Scryer's Gaze, you gain damage up to a max of 30%. And the effect lingers for 10 seconds after Scryer's Gaze ends. And Scryer's Gaze will not end until you reach 100 peril. So this is basically just big damage. You get big damage from this, but it's very dangerous because it builds your peril up to 100%. It won't kill you when it reaches 100. It'll just make it so you're at 100, and if you use any warp-based stuff, from 100 on, it'll blow you up. So you can, and probably will, kill yourself with this several times. The augments make you, increase movement speed while it's active. It reduces peril generation. It prevents overloading during its lingering effect. So if you're going to play Scryer's Gaze, I would recommend Warp Unbound at the very least, just because the lingering effect, when you're at 100%, you can just spam warp attacks for those 10 seconds, and You won't blow up, you won't kill yourself, you'll be good to go. And you also get all the benefits that we talked about, like all the high peril based stuff. You'll get all those benefits at maximum effectiveness while this is going on. So this is precognition is just benefits to like weak spot kills. It gives you like extra damage and stuff for killing stuff with headshots. And then this also just grants toughness damage reduction. So Scryer's Gaze is the highest damage potential, I think, of the three, but it's also the highest risk. So I wouldn't recommend this for new players until you start feeling really comfortable with managing your peril while dealing with multiple other things at the same time. Because if it's just your peril in a nutshell, it's really not that hard to deal with, but you're also dealing with specials, elites, you're dealing with a horde, maybe a boss, you're dealing with all these things at the same time, so it's easy to lose track of, oh, my 10 seconds is up and now I'm susceptible to killing myself again, so you accidentally, you mistime it by just a second and boom, you're dead. So this is a high skill ability for that reason. It's also what you would play if you play Psyker, because the other two are kind of not super useful for Psyker. The shield is kind of useful, but this is why Scryer's Gaze is why Psyker is even a thing. So now we're moving down to the very bottom of the tree and nearing the end of the video. So first off, we'll start with this top row. Solidity, this increases quell speed by 30%. This is another one of the better talents on the tree. I would almost always recommend having this. If you can manage to fit this into your build, I would almost always take it. Same thing with Warp Rider and Kinetic Deflection. These three talents are all extremely strong, and I try to fit them into every build I use, just because the quell speed, Warp Rider does 20% increased damage, not just to warp attacks, but everything in general. That includes just melee attacks. Whatever you're doing, you do more damage as you have more peril, so it's just really good. And then Kinetic Deflection, well below critical peril, which is at like 90%, is where critical peril is considered. Blocking an attack causes you to gain peril instead of losing stamina. So this basically makes it so you can tank anything that isn't a ranged attack. You can tank it. You can tank you can tank a demon host attacking you for a very long time. If you have Scryer's Gaze, you can tank it almost infinitely. So this is very, very strong for that reason. You can tank like Chaos Spawn Slams, like it just chasing you and like lashing out at you over and over again. You can just block all of it and you won't lose stamina, so you can just keep doing it. So Kinetic Deflection, extremely strong. Now we go back to Puppet Master. This is increased radius for your coherency. This isn't bad. Increased radius, so it'll make your aura affect all your allies. So if you're trying to go for a support build, Puppet Master is not bad. Crystalline Will is really good. It's really good if you're just getting into Psyker. Say you're like level 30, you're getting into Damnation, you're not quite used to dealing with like everything on the screen at once and trying to stay alive and all that kind of in between stuff. This will make it so when you overload and blow yourself up, it won't kill you. It'll just, you'll just lose the bar. So if you have like 2 wounds, you'll lose like 1 bar, like as if you had just been downed. So this can save you a little bit of trouble. I don't take it because I think once you reach a certain point, it just enforces bad habits, like not paying attention to what you're doing. So for me, I don't take it, but for newer players, I would definitely consider this. Tranquility through Slaughter is for Gunpsykers. Non-warp range critical hits quell 4% of peril. So if you kill stuff or hit stuff with a gun and you're critting, it quells some of your peril. This is reload speed well below a certain threshold of peril, and you generate peril when you reload. So these two are like Gunpsyker talents. If you're not using a gun, don't take them. True Aim is landing weak spot hits, grants your next range attack a guaranteed critical hit. So this is pretty good. This is good for gun Psyker specifically, but it's not bad. It's just it's mediocre on regular Psyker because you're not really headshotting a too terribly large amount unless you're playing like the Void Strike Staff. It's good on Assail though, so it'll give Assail critical hits guaranteed every once in a while, so that's pretty nice. And the last two regular talents we have on the tree are Empiric Resolve and Penetration of the Soul. So, Empiric Resolve is minus 40% peril generation across the board, no matter what it is up here that you're using to generate peril or your staff. There's just a flat negative 40% to that, so that's really strong. But it also has a negative 30% toughness replenished. So, all this toughness replenishment that you get from killing things, from generating peril, from quelling peril, all that is reduced by 30%. So this is a high risk, high reward talent. As you get better at Psyker, I would consider this. If you're new to Psyker, I would definitely not consider this. This will make sustaining your toughness very difficult. So you're basically trying to get hit as little as you possibly can. Like if you're playing through runs and you're only getting hit like maybe 2 or 3 times, like you can count the amount of times you've been hit on like 1 or 2 hands, you're probably fine to take this. But if you're getting hit a lot and you think that you're taking damage, you're almost dying, or you are going down pretty often, don't take this. It'll make it worse. This gives rending on warp attacks, so it gives rending on all your stabs, on the special on your greatsword or your blaze force sword. So this is pretty good. You do have to be above 75% peril, but you kind of want to try to hover around 70% to get the max effect of most of your talents that like Warp Rider. So it's not bad. It's 10% a little low, but it definitely helps. Alright, so the keystones, these are going to be playstyle defining things for the Psyker. The easiest one to explain it is probably Empowered Psionics, so we'll start with that. Killing stuff gives you a 10% chance to get a stack of this. The stacks are permanent until you use them. The stacks empower each of your blitzes, which are Brain Rupture, Smite, and Assail, so they will empower them in various different ways. Brain Rupture, it makes it so it costs no peril to generate. It increases the cast time and damage. Smite, it increases the damage and it spreads faster. Assail, it doesn't cost any peril to use 1 crystal, and the base damage is increased, and it does not consume any charges. So if the max stacks, you can increase to 3 by taking charged up, so you can get 3 charges of this. So it's pretty solid if you're relying on your blitzes for stuff. It pairs really well, in particular with Brain Burst, in my opinion, because you can use like 3 stacks of this to have Brain Burst trigger really quickly, and then you can use your shield or shriek and then have it trigger for 10 seconds really quickly, so you can really deal out some serious boss damage with this. The augments here are pretty good. There's Bio Lodestone and Overpowering Soul. You have to pick one of these, you can't take both. Overpowering Soul is the one I would take over Bio Lodestone. This increases the chance to gain Empowered Psionics by 5%. The 5% doesn't feel like it makes much of a difference. Overpowering Soul guarantees you get a stack whenever you kill an elite. Whenever you kill a shotgunner, a gunner, mauler, any of the Ogrins, you get a guaranteed stack of this. So I would take this, because if say there's like a hallway of gunners and you just have Brain Burst, you can just Brain Burst them all really quickly, and every time you kill one with Brain Burst, you'll get a stack back. So you can basically do it infinitely. So I would take this over Bio Lodestone basically every time. This basically just makes it so while you're using your blitz, it replenishes 20% toughness to you and your allies in coherency. So this is really strong. So generally, when I play this, I think I have it on this build. I take these two, and I take this if I can fit it, but sometimes I stretch out and take other things, just to see. I do mess around with different combinations, but I would recommend Psychic Leeching on the whole. But now we have Disrupt Destiny. Disrupt Destiny is basically, the game will choose a target randomly that you can see in front of you on the screen somewhere, anywhere. It could be far away, could be close, could be like in cover still. It'll highlight them blue instead of like a red ping, and it'll only be for you, so only you will see the highlighted enemy. It'll just look normal to your teammates. And if you kill that enemy, it gives you a stack, which gives you an increase to damage, crit damage, and headshot damage. And it stacks 15 times. These do run out. They have like a, I think it's like a 15-second cooldown, something like that. Like where the stacks will start dropping off one by one. If you have 15 stacks, you won't lose all of them. When the timer goes down, you'll just drop to 14. So you can maintain these kind of quickly as long as you're still just focusing on the targets. Every time you kill a target, it replenishes toughness and grants movement speed. So that's pretty solid. The nice thing for me is the increased movement speed when you kill these targets. It's 20%, so you do actually really feel the 20% increased movement speed. It feels really good. So every time you kill one of the enemies with Purloin Providence, it makes it so you quell 5% of your peril automatically. And Lingering Influence, I was wrong, it's not 15 seconds, it's 5 that they drop off. This increases the cooldown to 10, so that's pretty nice. I usually take Lingering Influence. This will increase the maximum stacks from 15 to 25. I don't really know which one's better. I just know that for me, Lingering Influence stays the most consistent, and Perfectionism is really good in higher difficulties because you're almost constantly going to be killing stuff. So this is difficulty dependent in my opinion. If you're playing like regular Damnation or Heresy, Lingering Influence is the way to go. Perfectionism, anything higher than that, I would take Perfectionism, I think. And then Cruel Fortune, basically if you headshot something and kill it, it gets it gives you 2 stacks instead of 1. So extra value. And last is Warp Siphon. So killing an elite or a specialist will give you a warp charge. These can stack, I think, what is it, 4 times, and say you use your Venting Shriek, they will refund a gigantic portion of your cooldown. So you can use Venting Shriek almost twice for like back to back. So they give you like stacks of this, and you just get a bunch of cooldown. Every time you use your ability, you basically get to use it again right away. So this can be super clutch, and you can get these stacks super quickly. You can have it reduce your peril. You can make the stacks also do different things while you still have them. So you can also get benefits from it while you're not using your ability. Like reduce peril generation for each stack, increases all base damage of everything, including melee damage for each stack. And then this replenishes 30% toughness whenever you gain one. And just because you're at max doesn't mean you can't gain one, because they do fall off like Disrupt Destiny stacks do. So if you're at max stacks and you kill like another specialist or an elite, it'll just refill the timer, which counts as gaining another stack. So you'll be gaining 30% toughness back pretty consistently. And then killing an enemy with Soul Blaze has a 10% chance to grant you a warp charge. So this is pretty good if you're playing like the Venting Shriek with Creeping Flames. If you're not playing that, I wouldn't really take this. Warp Battery, this can store up to 6. It makes it so 4 charges turns to 6. There's never a reason not to take this if you have the extra points to invest. And then you can only take Psychic Vampire or Fire Reborn. I would take Psychic Vampire almost every time. When you or an ally incoherency kills any enemy, including dregs, it doesn't have to be an elite or a specialist or even like one of the little guys with guns. Any enemy at all dies from you or your team while you're in coherency. You have 4% chance to gain a warp charge, meaning you'll get stacks pretty quickly, pretty easily. You'll get these pretty often, so you can get a serious amount of benefits from this. In my opinion, all the keystones that the Psyker has are good. There's not really one that I'm like, oh, it's, you should take this over this or vice versa. Like, all of these are really strong. So play with each of them, kind of see what you think. They different ones do better with different things. Like Empowered Psionics is good for a sale, but I don't really play it with that just because each stack only affects one crystal, which those 3 crystals will be free, and you won't have to recharge them. But it just doesn't. It doesn't seem like enough of a benefit for me to really take it very often over Disrupt Destiny, anyways. Disrupt Destiny, vice versa, doesn't really seem very good for some staffs versus others. So you kind of gotta mess around with different combinations. Almost any combination will be okay though. Like, even if I want to play a sale with Empowered Psionics or Warp Siphon, it's almost always going to be pretty solid. My one caveat is Warp Siphon takes a little bit of investment, where these 3 you can kind of just do like, I have like 3 points here, I'll do 3 points in this, or maybe 4. The Warp Siphon will take like 5. So Warp Siphon will take a little bit more investment. So if you don't, it takes a little bit more investment to get the maximum benefit out of it, but it has a higher amount of value more consistently. Disrupt Destiny can technically have more value because you can get 25 stacks, but just because you can get 25 stacks does not mean you'll always be there. So I would say it's a lot easier and more consistent to use Warp Siphon if you're looking for just long-term benefits throughout the mission. Unless you're playing a crit specific build, I wouldn't really recommend Disrupt Destiny because the stacks grant damage, sure, but they also grant crit damage as well. And so if you're not using I feel like if you're not using every benefit that you're getting from the keystone, then you might as well take a keystone that you can get all the benefits out of. But that is my small-ish guide to Psyker. I hope that this helps someone. If you have any questions, please let me know. This is one of my favorite classes to play. And I might make guides on the other classes in the future if I feel like it, or if I feel like I'm good enough at the other classes to do so. Other than that, have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.